Imagination according to Humphrey, Chapter 10, Special Guest. Joy's story is great. Rosie helped him a lot, and I helped a little too. I squeaked to my neighbor when I returned on Monday morning. Boing! Og twanged with excitement. The rest of the week was busy, 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 as my friends finished writing and illustrating their stories. They worked on special paper and made them into little books. At night, I finished my story and tried to add lots of zing. I was pleased when I could write the end. What is our special surprise? Cassie asked one day. Is it a person, place, or thing? And what are we supposed to do? Calm down, Cassie, Mrs. Brisbane said. The surprise is on Friday, and all you have to do is show up. Cassie looked calmer after she said that. Once the books were finished on Thursday, Mrs. Brisbane placed them all on the table where Og's tank and my cage sit. Wow, they looked unsqueakably wonderful. They had illustrations and fantastic covers and everything. I guess my story was a little plain, but at least I'd finished it. Later that night, when Aldo came in to clean, he saw the finished books. What's this? He asked. Your class wrote books? Yes, I squeaked. Do you like them? Aldo began to thumb through the books. These are really good, he said. Leave it to Mrs. Brisbane to teach her students to write so well. Aldo looked through a few more. When I get to be a teacher, I want my students to write like this, he said. Then he looked right at me. And Humphrey, I am going to be a teacher before long. A very good teacher, I hope. I know you will, I squeaked. Aldo's so good at sweeping and dusting and going to school and being a friend. I'm sure he'll be a great, great, great teacher, too. Later, while he dusted Mrs. Brisbane's desk, he said, Well, what do you know? He was looking at a piece of paper. I'd like to be here for this, he said. I don't have class then. I'll ask Mrs. Brisbane if I can come. Come to what? I squeaked. But he didn't answer. I'm happy that Aldo was coming to our class. I wasn't happy that I didn't know what the surprise was. Once Aldo was gone, I had two things on my mind. Getting a good look at all the books and finding out what the note said. I jiggled my lock that doesn't lock and opened the door. Then I strolled along the table looking at each book lined up there. Oh, I exclaimed when I saw Sophie's book. The parrots looked colorful, but their sharp beaks looked a little frightening. Gee, I said as I looked at Small Paul's book. His time travel machine was awe-inspiring, and the adventure he wrote was exciting and even a little scary. Kelsey's book was all pink and purple, and she did a wonderful job of describing a ballet. And to think that Be Careful Kelsey once thought she was clumsy. Simon's book about Italy made me a little bit hungry. Luckily, I had some celery stored in my cheek pouch. When I got to Joey's book, all I could say was, wow. His descriptions of the animals in Africa were fantastic, but his drawings were like something out of a library book. Yet I knew they'd come from his own brain. Joey is very talented, I squeaked. Boing! Og agreed before making a spectacular leap into the water. My friends had done something wonderful. They'd become writers. It was a lot of work, but their books were beautiful. All that reading made me tired, and I knew it would be a lot of work to climb up Mrs. Brisbane's desk. I decided not to go. It would be fun to find out about the surprise at the same time as my classmates. When I returned to my cage, I took out the little notebook from behind my mirror. I knew my story wasn't as great as the ones my classmates had written, and I knew none of my friends would ever know I wrote a story. But when I read about flying hamster airlines, I could picture myself flying all my friends to the places they loved most, and I felt a special feeling. I think it's called joy. The next day, everyone in room 26 was jittery and excited because we knew we were going to have a special surprise. I didn't want the surprise to be the return of Pearl. I didn't want the surprise to be something terrible, such as Mrs. Brisbane leaving. I did want the surprise to be something wonderful, and it was. After morning recess, strange things started to happen. First, Mr. Morales came into room 26. He doesn't come here too often because he has so much to do as principal of the school. Next, my dear friend Miss Mack entered with her entire first grade class. The biggest surprise was that she brought Gigi with her. I think it's time for Humphrey and Og to meet our class guinea pigs, she said, as she set Gigi between Og's tank and my cage. Of course, Gigi and I had already met, but Miss Mac didn't know that. Gigi, meet Og, I said. Og, meet Gigi. Boing, boing, boing. Og hopped around his tank. Nice to meet you too, Gigi squealed. I knew you'd like each other, I squeaked happily. Once the students from room 12 were seated, Mr. Morales came to the front of the room. Boys and girls, I know you've been working hard on your writing, he said, and you've done a very good job. So, we have a special guest today. I turned to the back of the room where a tall woman with red hair stood next to Mrs. Brisbane. And surprise, Alda was there. Mr. Morales continued, I want you to make her feel welcome and to listen and to treat her with respect. Here she is, the author, Cameron Cole. As the tall woman walked to the front of the room, my classmates all applauded. They looked as excited and as amazed as I was. First of all, I thought Cameron Cole was a man. Second of all, I never thought I'd meet the author of the Dragon book in person. Once the clapping and cheering stopped, Miss Cole began to answer students' questions. I climbed up to the tippy top of my cage, so I had a good view. I like to write stories because I like to use my imagination, she said. Does anyone here like that too? Every hand plus my paw went up. She pulled a bright blue notebook out of her bag. It's important to keep a notebook, she said. I take my notebook everywhere. Mrs. Brisbane asked our class to hold up their notebooks. I was tempted to pull mine out of its hiding place, but in the end, I left it there. Cameron Cole continued answering questions about dragons. Yes, she had seen a bearded dragon. No, she had never seen a huge fire-breathing dragon like Goldie, and she wasn't sure whether or not they were real. Yes, she loved fairy tales and dragon books when she was growing up. Then she answered questions about writing. Holly asked her where she got her ideas. That's what I wanted to know, too. Miss Cole said I find them absolutely everywhere. Things that have happened to me, things that happen to people I know, things I read in newspapers and books, conversations I overhear. You need to be open to ideas, and you'll find them. She paused to glance over at her table and smiled. I have to admit, I had an imaginary dragon friend when I was little, she said. I'm very grateful to him for inspiring me. And I used to lie on the grass and look up at the clouds, imagining there was a secret kingdom with a great big castle up there. That was the beginning of the Gil Goodfriend story. Imaginary dragon? That's a lot like an imaginary bear named Bear. Maybe Carlos will write a book about his friend one day. Who knows, she said, walking over to get a closer look at Gigi, Og, and me. Someday, I might even write a book about these adorable animals. Really? I squeaked. I write about us all the time. Cameron Cole laughed. This hamster seems to have a lot to say. I do, I replied. I could hardly believe I was talking to a real author. Boing, Og added. Oh, and the frog has ideas too, Miss Cole chuckled. Say something, Gigi, I told my guinea pig friend, but Gigi was too shy to squeak. Mrs. Brisbane said that you started with a sentence and then a paragraph and ended up with a story, Cameron Cole said. That's exactly what I do when I write a book. So, congratulations. Then our teacher announced that it was almost time for lunch. My friends groaned. I think they would have gladly given up lunch to keep talking with Cameron Cole. She signed our dragon book and my friends' notebooks. I wished I could have had her sign my notebook, too. The time had passed so quickly. My friends left for lunch, and Mrs. Brisbane and Miss Mac took Cameron Cole to the teacher's lounge for lunch as well. Aldo stayed behind to talk to us. Well, my friends, I don't usually see you during the day, he said, but I learned the author was coming, and one of the subjects I'll have to teach is writing. She gave me a lot of ideas. Me too, Aldo, I squeaked. I have to start my student teaching soon. That's where you practice being a teacher in a classroom, he said, so wish me luck. Good luck, I shouted. Boing, boing, Og twanged. And Gigi even managed to softly squeal, luck. After Aldo cleaned that night, I took out my little notebook and read my story by the light of the street lamp outside the window. I was a little nervous about reading it. What if I didn't like it? Would I have to start all over again? Luckily, the story sounded pretty good to me. So I opened my lock that doesn't lock and hurried over to Og's tank. Would you like to hear my story? I asked. Boing, boing. Og definitely sounded interested. And so I began to read I'll never forget the day I became the first hamster airline pilot ever. I started my own company called Flying Hamster Airlines so I could fly my human friends anywhere they wanted to go. First, I took Do It Now Daniel to the home of his favorite author, D.D. Denby. I wished I could stay and get some writing tips, but it was time to take Philippe to the theme park. Then I flew my friend Helpful Holly to Phoebe's house. Holly helps so many people, I was happy to help her too. Next, my zippy plane took Joey to the town where his dad lives. He was glad to get to spend extra time with his dad. But instead of staying in town, Joey and his dad decided to fly along with me. We whizzed over to Europe so Simon could eat Italian food. I even had a tiny bit of real Italian pizza. Yum! Then I stopped in Paris to take Kelsey to see a ballet. The dancers were so graceful. They practically flew through the air just like my plane. I would have stayed in Paris, but I had to fly to Africa. First, I took Rosie to see the pyramids in Egypt. The Sphinx was larger and fiercer than I had imagined. Then I took Joey and his dad to another part of Africa where we saw large, colorful creatures. The trumpeting of the elephants, the roars of the lions were sounds I'll never forget. The zebras looked like someone had taken a brush to paint them black and white. I loved the giraffes and their long necks. They were so tall I could hardly see their heads. Next, I flew Sophie to the island of the parrots. It was a noisy place, but Sophie loved talking to the birds, and they loved her. I wish she could understand my squeaks the way she understands the parrots. I dropped Cassie off on a quiet beach where she could watch the waves breaking all day long. I saved the best part of the trip for last. I flew Mrs. Brisbane and her husband to Tokyo. When they surprised their son Jason, the look on Mrs. Brisbane's face made me happy, happy, happy. I have lots more plans for Flying Hamster Airlines. Who knows, maybe someday I'll fly you to a special place too. Og was silent after I finished. Then he leapt up in his cage and said, boing, 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 before diving into the water side of his tank. I think he really liked it. And I really liked reading it to him because stories are meant to be shared. I think maybe Gigi would like it too, I said, but she might be asleep by now. Og splashed loudly. It could be a bedtime story, I said. Clenching the notebook between my teeth, I slid down the table leg and headed toward room 12. Gigi wasn't sound asleep yet. When I asked if she'd like to hear my story, she squealed with happiness. She squealed even more when I finished. How did you learn to read and write? She asked. I paid attention in class, I said. You should try it too. I will, Gigi said. Then as I headed back to room 26, something amazing happened. My imagination went to work, and I thought of a brand new idea. I couldn't wait to write it in my notebook, and that's the best feeling in the world. My writer's ramblings. When I began my story, I felt a little fright, but now that I have finished, I really love to write. Humphrey's top 10 tips for writers. Number 1, keep a writer's notebook to jot down your ideas, or you might forget them. You don't have to keep yours hidden the way I do. It's good to have it with you most of the time. Number 2, brainstorm your story ideas by writing down all your thoughts as fast as you can for 5 minutes. Don't stop to judge whether it's a good idea or not. When you're finished, you may have a few good ideas, a brain shower, or a lot of great ideas, a brain blizzard. But really, all you need is one idea you really like. Write something you'd enjoy reading. Number 3, once you have a story you like, brainstorm ideas for a setting and the characters. Number 4, now you can work on the story. Your story should have a definite beginning, middle, and end. That might not be as easy as it sounds, but you can do it. Number 5, start filling in the details about what is happening to your characters. Number 6, add some zing to your writing by using dialogue. Make sure your characters don't all sound the same. The more you write, the better you'll get. It takes practice, so try to write on a regular basis. The more you read, the better your writing will be. Read a lot of different kinds of books, too. Number 8, when you're writing a story, you shouldn't think about what other people will think of it or whether it will get published. You should only think about making it the best story you can possibly write. That's all that counts. Number 9, revise. Each time you go through the story, you have an opportunity to make it better and better. Cameron Cole said that professional writers revise a lot, and I believe her. And number 10, don't forget that writing is fun. Write something that makes you happy, something you'd like to read, that tells a story only you can tell. Then, my friend, you will realize that writing is really fun.